Good morning, it's Frank here with Frank's DIY and Homeowners Help, and here is my problem today. You'd think it's minor, you'd think it's manageable, but it's my darn coffee maker. Got this fancy schmancy, what is that, Nali and Zani coffee. I guess they call this a Moka Pot or something like that, from Italy. It's supposed to be percolating coffee right now. You can see steam is coming up through the top there, right? It's also coming out of the back there, which isn't a big deal. There's no steam coming out from the middle here, so it's not like it's leaking. But right now, there should be coffee coming out of that thing instead of just steam. So somehow it's not working right, and I'm going to take it apart and see if we can figure it out. Okay, so it's cooled down enough to handle it. Now the physics of this coffee maker are pretty simple. You have water in this bottom chamber here. You fill it up to a certain point, and then you put this basket coffee holder filter in it. And water is forced up through the coffee. I'll show you the proper procedure in a sec. Through the coffee, out this percolating spout, and it fills the top chamber with brewed coffee. So now the bottom here is still filled with water, so I'm going to try and do this without making a mess, which I probably will anyway, but that's the fun part of it. So you fill up this basket with the coffee, and you can see the coffee is pretty much untouched. And you fill the bottom with water. The water boils. It's got no place to go other than up through this space here, this funnel if you will, which forces it up through the coffee, continues it up through the coffee maker, and Bob's your uncle. So, well, here's the problem right here. This is supposed to have a seal on it. This is supposed to have a gasket on it, and it doesn't. So if it doesn't have a gasket and it doesn't properly seal against this top edge here, then steam's just going to come out the side. It's going to come around the path of least resistance, and the top of this lower chamber is going to have the water coming out through here. So there's your problem right there. There's supposed to be a seal right here, a gasket. And I got to try and figure out or find out why that gasket is not here. There's also usually supposed to be a filter. There's supposed to be a gasket with a sieve filter here that prevents coffee grounds from going up. So you can see the coffee grounds. So obviously that's not working. So the mystery is pretty much solved. Now I've just got to find the darn gasket, and you can make coffee. Alright, so here's the solution. So I went online and looked up and ordered a set of 3 silicone gaskets and 1 inside replacement screen. So I guess this stuff does disappear or wear out or get broken or get flushed down the toilet or whatever. So we'll order that. That part ends up going right up in here and filtering out the grounds that come through and providing that seal around this edge, which is what forces the water and steam up through here. So that'll come in a couple days. I'll put it on and make me a cup of coffee. Okay, so I feel kind of silly continuing this video, but I'm going to anyway, because at first I thought I had some kind of a major defect in this very expensive and very new coffee maker, and it turns out I was just missing this thing right here. So that is the last strainer and gasket that goes between the filter basket down here and the upper chamber right here. So I went out and ordered a new set of them, and I found this online. I think I found this on Amazon, and it was $9 for a set of 3 replacement silicone gaskets, as you can see right there, and 1 replacement strainer, which should last you a long time. But while I waited for this to arrive, I actually found this one that someone had just misappropriated. And so instead of this being like a DIY on how to fix a coffee maker, it's going to be a DIY now on, well, how not to lose stuff, but also how to make the perfect pot of coffee. Okay, so I guess the place to start is your actual coffee. And of course, this is your own personal preference. I use this Muskoka roastery coffee because I find it's a rich, dark roast, but it's not bitter. I like my coffee strong and dark, but I don't like it bitter. So my personal preference is this. Of course, they're not paying me for this, so you can use whatever coffee you want. Let's focus more on the actual process of using this cafetera, which is what my parents call it in Spanish, basically coffee maker. I think it's called a Moka Pot or something like that. So you just pour the coffee in, and generally if you fill the bottom with all the water it can take, then you should fill this basket with all the coffee it can take. Now this is already ground, but I do have a grinder as well, so sometimes if I get nice fresh beans, I'll grind the beans myself. And it does make a difference on the taste for sure, so that's an option. So you fill in this pot, and something you really should do here is just compress the coffee a little bit. So this is essentially an espresso machine, right? And so you see when they have those espresso makers, they compress the coffee down. And the amount that you compress this coffee now is going to affect how strong it is, because the more you compress it, the longer it's going to take the water to percolate through, and the more coffee it'll absorb. Now my uncle in Spain owned a bar and had a really good espresso machine. He was really renowned for his coffee making. And he said that the amount you compress the coffee also depended on the temperature and the humidity in the air. So that's way more advanced than I'm going to get. But that's where I'm going to go. I'm going to compress it that much. This is what I chose to use just because I had it handy. You can use a spoon or something. I think you should compress it a little bit. If you wanted to now, you could top off the little, the 1/4 inch space that I've made by compressing it and put more coffee in, but I don't. That's your personal choice. The thing that's important to do here is make sure there's no coffee grounds on the rim here, because if there is, that's going to interrupt this silicone seal. And of course you check the seal as well to make sure there's no coffee there. This will filter out the grounds so that no grounds end up in this top chamber, but you want to make sure these are nice and clean before you go as well. So now you fill up the bottom to a level that ends up below the basket. I should have done that before I put the coffee in now, because now it can be a little tricky. But and then you put it to boil. You want to make sure that we're filling this to a level that's going to end up below the bottom of this basket. If you go too high, then it won't percolate properly because you'll have water already in the coffee before it's even boiled. A little more. If you don't put enough water in, then it's going to change the flavor of your coffee and of course the amount of the coffee that you're making as well. So that works out pretty good, just like that. Now when you tighten this up, you don't have to go maniac on it. You can actually tighten up to the point where you can actually feel the silicone starting to take hold and compress a little bit. And then you just give it just another little squeeze there. You shouldn't need more than that. Now when the water does start to percolate and boil, you just have a look around the seal here. And if the seal isn't right, you'll see bubbles coming out of there, and that's a problem. You may just have to tighten it further, or you may need a new one of these. Now the other thing I do, and again, I don't know if it's actually scientific or not, but I don't usually put the burner on high. So that's the high level, that's your maximum dosage of heat. I usually turn it down and just do a slightly slower percolation, right? And for some reason I just find that it takes a little longer, so if you're in a rush, don't do this. And if you're in a rush, you're not going to make a great cup of coffee anyway. But turn it down maybe halfway, and just allows the coffee to percolate a little more slowly, and it just ends up tasting better. Now another thing that's almost sacrilege for a Spanish coffee drinker is to pour cold milk into your steaming hot coffee. So what they do and what I love to do, again when I have time, this is my Saturday morning ritual. I actually don't drink coffee during the week. I drink tea because it's quicker and easier. But my Saturday morning ritual is take my time and make a nice fresh cup of espresso coffee. So what we do here is we pour the milk into the pot and heat that up gently as well, because I'm going to have milk in my coffee. We're starting to get the sounds and smells of victory. Just see it starting to give some background there. Maybe this is better background. Starting to percolate. You see some air comes out of the back of that unit, just the back of the lid. That's perfectly fine. The steam is just coming up through the middle, hitting the top of that dome lid, and some of it comes out that way and some of it comes out this way. It doesn't really matter. The really important part is to look here, to look at this seam and see if you can see any bubbles coming out of that. If that's the case, then your silicone seal is failing, or it's not tight enough, and you're not going to get a properly developed cup of coffee. So this to me is the sound and the smell of victory. I like to set this up on low. You can see it's still very low heat, as is the milk. The milk's almost ready to go too. It's going to work out perfectly here. Look at that. So the milk is just starting to boil. I'll probably turn that right down or off because it's ready. Turn the milk off. And we'll let this continue to boil. I'm going to give you a peek inside here just to show you what's happening. But when you open this lid, drippings will come off the back here and drip down the side of the machine. That's why this is down here. This is getting caked in. So I'm going to do it anyway just so that you can see what's happening. See there, you can see it's just starting to percolate up nice and slowly. See how it spits it out? And that is becoming your perfect cup of espresso coffee. Okay, so you remember I said what happens if you lift this lid while the coffee is percolating. The coffee rolls down the side and the outside and causes this streak. You see that? And most of this will come off right now with the sponge, but the stuff at the bottom, because you're caking it and baking it in with the heat, that'll get caked right in and it'll discolor and eventually brown up your machine. Not too big a deal for me. I don't care much about aesthetics, so. And I just did that for the demonstration anyway. Then what you do is you grab your favorite mug, like this one. Basically for me it's the biggest one I could possibly get. I'll pour the entire cup in, or the entire pot in. This technically is, I think, 8 to 9 cups of coffee. So it's 8 to 9 cups of espresso. For me, it's one bruto. So my Spanish relatives, when they saw the sizes of our coffee cups here in Canada, they called us brutal, or brutes, because we drink such large quantities of coffee. This stuff is different because it's so much stronger. You don't need as much, but I love pouring almost 2/3 coffee, 1/3 milk, and that, my friends, is my perfect cup of coffee. And I'll pull out that little skin of milk from the top, like that. And now, the last thing left to do before I start my perfect Saturday, the perfect Oreo dip. Dipping to the point of near disintegration and pulling it out and eating it.